first, we need to talk about AI. And I'm so glad that I'm moderating the panel that I don't have to give the answers. And two, I want to talk about being an academic in 2035, which includes skills, identity, strategy. So how do we today adapt or use dynamic capabilities so that we are prepared for what's coming our way? We're going to do it in a very emergent way, see who wants to answer any of the questions that I have for you. And I will start with the very first one, which is the one we have to answer, and I guess you can build an experience to answer me. How do you think AI will actually reshape our day-to-day work? When are you using AI? And when do you think that you will never use AI because AI won't be as good or it's not ethical to use it? Who wants to go first? I realize it's a tough one. Yeah.
Of course, there is a lot we don't know. I think that realistically, perhaps, one good area where we can benefit from GenAI is that instead of having a research assistant, GenAI would do a much better job and we save money. It could be more reliable, it could be faster, it has all sorts of advantages. So I hope that my life will be so much easier because of AI. I don't have any existential academic fears at this point in time, at least. But I'm hoping it will be integrated indeed. And I think the next generation of researchers, including me, we really have to take some training on how to make effective use of AI to make our lives easier. I would love to have AI to do the tasks that I don't like so much, like literature review or boring things or repetitive, and focus on the more fun stuff. So this is what I'm hoping.
Do you think there is a risk that because of GenAI, it becomes easier to produce research? Therefore, the big names in the field will be able to produce more research than what used to be the case. Again, I'm always thinking Larry Lessig. What if Larry Lessig can actually publish as equally good research as he has been publishing in the past every 3 months? Is it creating like a dominance issue in which we only read the top scholars because that's already plenty enough? And what does it mean for the very, very young researchers starting with a paper when the top scholars can actually publish more? So when there is no more output out there. Is that a risk, or on the contrary, do you think AI would actually benefit young researchers?
In fact, we have here a problem which is more general, that is to say the impact on AI, and especially generative AI on the workforce. AI can lower the barrier to entry on the academic market. We have the barrier to entry relating to the English language, for instance, the barrier for entries in terms of econometric capacities, the field of economics. You can use AI to make survey, you can use AI to translate paper, you can use AI to test the robustness of econometric assessment and so on. So you can say the AI may lower this barrier to entry, and we can have something like an increase of low productivity researcher that may equal the performance in the field. But on the other side, you mentioned the fact that we can produce more with AI. That is to say, we can have something like a competition overdose in terms of number of paper. And the difficulty will be how to select. And here you can have a premium to well-known researcher, a problem of overproductions of papers.
Okay, so it may be that then there is more premium in being published in a good journal because there is more out there, and at least the journal ideally would do a nice screening of the papers that deserved to be read. The question becomes, do we still peer review in 5 years from now, or do we use stuff such as revise.io? I just tried this one. I'm going to ask you the question to you, Henri, if you don't mind. Do you have the concern, like how do you deal with the increasing amount of publication and output production by researchers? Is that something that impacts your work already or not?
We really live in our ivory tower over there. We don't read research. No, seriously. There's always some kind of hearsay. There's some kind of selection process before research reaches us. Interesting papers with ideas is very easy when you have intermediaries like that to get to these instead of getting drawn into papers which are just doing. That's one of the big dangers already in social science in general, is to do too much quantitative analysis and not to have in mind what you want to prove or what new idea you want to explore. And that we benefit from that, even if that means that we get the papers a bit late or research a bit late.
Question to you, Francisco. So there are two ways, I guess. One way for institutions and us to find papers is to say, okay, I'm going to refocus on the top journals in the field and trust that they do the peer review process in a good way. I'm actually going to use AI, and I'm going to prompt a system to, on a weekly basis, go out there and identify any paper that is published anywhere in the world that is relevant to my research by giving a list of all the papers that I've put out there. Something that you mentioned in the speech is that no one reads papers anymore, and I was thinking maybe a new metrics to measure academic success will be how many times you are cited by an AI system indeed. How do you position yourself? Is that something you think about? Do you do things so that your paper will be found by AI systems, or are you just deploring the fact that no one reads papers but without a clear solution?
I'm a bit pessimistic in terms of academic paper readership numbers, but I think concerning artificial intelligence, probably I'm one of the oldest here and I use it all the time. For me, it's like the typewriter many years ago. So how can you conceive that you are not going to use any AI tools these days? The Commission, by the way, uses that all the time. They do this call for comments and they say we're going to process all the answers using artificial intelligence. They cannot read that. And some people, I remember making comments that said, if you're not going to read it, then maybe I write it also using artificial intelligence. So I think the impact is going to be huge. Before I was talking about traditional dogmatic legal scholarship in many boring, mainly Southern European, Mediterranean countries. That's dead in a few years. If you're doing purely descriptive analysis with no creativity, that's not going to be done by humans anymore. I think one of the problems we face in many countries is that state universities are completely ignoring investment in training in artificial intelligence. We in IE, for example, we are not obsessed, but we are being killed with all these things all the time. We have tons of workshops, and I think this is terrible because people that cannot afford going to a private university simply they don't know what it is, which is terrible. We live in a situation in which students use for assignments all the time artificial intelligence. I remember at the beginning one of the discussions was, should we ban this? And I said, what are you talking about? You cannot do it. Obviously, I think, as you said, I use it all the time. The point here is that, what do I use it for? For me, it's an interactive process in which it's far from being a one-shot transaction. I'm talking with whatever tool I'm using, and it's a sort of a brainstorming process. Obviously, it doesn't have ideas. It can make things much easier, and in terms of editing, I find it amazing. I guess the problem here, in 10 years, most academic papers will be written by artificial intelligence. Not sure. Good ones, I don't think so. But now you can ask ChatGPT to write a paper as if you were Lessig, because you feed it all his stuff, and obviously he has a style. You can mimic his style, but still, every once in a while he has a new idea, and I don't think ChatGPT is going to make the new idea of Lessig. If he does, I mean, it will be amazing. And it's over, but one of the great things for me, I'm 55. This may be 15 years from now, so it's going to be a problem for your children.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll be in the Caribbean.
Okay, so that's the question that I have for all of you. Are you confident that in a couple of years from now, your position won't be disrupted by AI? And I mean, if you look at it, I don't want to be very basic, but creation of new ideas usually is a combination of past ideas. And I've experienced that AI system can actually already do that. If I say, hey, can you combine string theory with computational law, it will come up with something that has never been written before. Maybe it's crap, but maybe I get an idea out of it. So already we are seeing that, I would argue, AI systems are thinking, although not in the human sense of the term. So coming back to my question, looking at the progress all experienced over the last 3 years, how confident are you that your position won't be radically changed in 3-4 years from now? And I guess I could ask all of you the question.
Thank you.
On a scale from 0 to 10.
I'm fairly confident. I'm an optimist by nature, I think. However, to the point, I agree very much with Francisco. I think it's a great enhancement tool, but I don't think it can cross a certain frontier. So what I mean, you mentioned Einstein before. You need an Einstein to say to the AI specifically what to do, what are the right questions. So Einstein very often has such kind of helpers. He was a great thinker, but he had other people write the math for him, do certain things, and so on. So I think it could be an amazing empowering tool, but it cannot, if you tell it, combine these fields maybe, and where are the gaps and where are the limitations, you can go and correct it. But I don't think it will come up with something that, perhaps in this interactive mode, yes, but you need someone to guide it. I don't think on its own it will be a rigorous way of finding answers or writing papers or creating new ideas. I'm not convinced about that, at least.
Yeah, more or less the same position. In fact, some types of papers can be without problem in a couple of years. If it is only commenting a case, just explaining the decision of a court, you can do that, I think. It is to make a survey. What is a good synthesis on one point, and AI can do this very easily and, frankly speaking, better than us. Here, it is the science of prompting. In fact, we can ask to compare two research fields to have some cross-seeing on one point and so on. We can ask to test the robustness of an hypothesis. You can ask an AI to find data, but you have still to know what is the proper prompt to make a dialogue, and after to check the robustness of the results. And I think that we will have still, for a couple of years or a couple of decades, I do not know, a social utility just by this, to know what question to ask, and after to check the robustness of the results. And I think we can terminate our career with Francisco. Harry, I do not know, but Anna too young, Thibaut also. So Francisco, you are on your side.
I would like to think that I am indispensable. You know, there's this saying that cemeteries are filled with indispensable people.
Yeah.
So it sounds a bit arrogant to say, I don't think that AI can do the same thing as I do, that my value added is so exceptional that a machine couldn't do it, or a prompted machine couldn't do it. So I don't have a real answer on that. I think I'm not very good at anything, but I'm good at many things. And my skill is to try to connect these many things, you know, the dilettante kind of argument. But assuming that there are skills that an AI could not duplicate, my fear is not so much about me, but I spend quite a lot of my time training people and trying to pass on my experience and pass on my way of looking at issues and trying to solve problems. If, let's say, 99 or 95% of what I'm doing can be replaced by AI, am I worth the wage that I'm getting today? And if I'm not worth it, then I cannot train others. And who is going to train them? So I really see that more as a challenge for the future than whether it is irreplaceable or not.
Do you think that at the Commission, already as of today, there are people that have not been hired, especially junior, young people, because already AI is here and is helping you? You talked about the training relationship. So is that a thing already, or is it not?
It's not yet there, but I see it coming. There are things that we are doing using these tools instead of hiring many stagiaires to do that. And so the time that the stagiaires are not spending on that, so the stagiaires that we are not hiring, is less training.
Yeah.
But that's for stagiaires. It's not yet for officials, but it will come.
I think 2 years probably is too short period of time, but in a few years, probably. Because now, for example, one of the areas where I try to use artificial intelligence, I haven't been very successful, is in empirical legal research. I thought, for example, I have I don't know, it's probably the single database in Europe with all the judgments in the trucks cartel, over 6,000 judgments, not only Spain, but also Germany, France, Italy, others. So I said, oh, this is going to be great. I asked to do stuff with this, with proper prompting and all that, and it's a disaster, the outcome. Why? because the raw or the material you are feeding the judges in Spain mainly, but also in other countries, they don't know how to write. Even for a human being, it's impossible to understand what they're talking about. But I think they will get to a point where artificial intelligence is able to understand them better than we do. But I think you face this problem as a legal scholar. You read something and you don't understand what the judge is talking about. That's not going to be. Now, artificial intelligence cannot do it. On the future, probably they're going to do better than us because they can go back to all the judgments written by the same judge, and on the basis of that and more, be able to compare and understand, interpret better than we do. But now, so far, for example, one of the things I started asking, can you please tell me what is the expert report used mainly by the plaintiffs? It made all of them up. They didn't do any. So, again, I think it's an issue of time. In a few years, probably things are going to be much better. But there will always be room for humans to do probably less. You're right. What Frederick was saying, traditional legal scholarship in boring countries, that's dead. And it's going to be terrible because, that I don't know what they're going to do. And I think encouraged with this competition is the papers presented here, they couldn't be done by artificial intelligence. So that's great.
To be fair, I'll just give you my 2 cents. What I see is that AI is going a layer of abstraction always higher than what used to be the case in the previous iteration. So now you see that at the end of a prompt, the AI comes up with an answer and then will now suggest, what do you want me to do as the next step, which is already the start of thinking or anticipation. Just last week, OpenAI was able, and competitors would do it in a couple of days, to code for 24 hours straight without stopping and just anticipating what should be the next stage. If we continue in this direction, I think the AI is going to go always a layer of abstraction higher than what used to be the case. At some point, it might be that the core of the value that we will bring will be to actually put a stamp on it with our name to say, I verified that and I agree with it. And I'm not sure if there is much more for us out there. But moving on to part 2 of the panel. So being an academic in 2035. So as we heard, there are things that we can try to anticipate, but a lot of uncertainty. And no one certainly on the panel would say, I know where AI will put us in 5 years from now. We may have best guesses. So what do we do as academics in 2025, knowing that the future is very uncertain? My first question is, for especially the young academics, competition law scholars, and law and tech and law and econ, what do you do today in order to acquire skills that may enable you to survive in tomorrow's new research world? Is it purely computer science? Is it that you move to cognitive sciences? Because we see that AI systems, they nudge users so much that maybe we need to understand the psychology. Is it economics? Because we see that they are driven by incentives of profits. So do we need to understand more of the economic incentive behind? Again, taking for granted that they know about computational law already, what other skills do they acquire? Okay.
Yes, Francisco spoke some minutes ago about law and something. When I started my career as an economist, it was economics and something, economics and law and so on. Now I think we cannot rely only on the law and economics nexus. We need to make something more. We can go toward cognitive sciences, toward computing sciences and so on, but perhaps with 2 different levels. A first level might be to learn to use those tools. That is to say, to be able to use the resources for our researches. And a second level might be to master one of these disciplines, to be able to prompt, to be able to go further. But again, there is a difficulty. That is to say, you cannot combine all this knowledge. You need to be perhaps augmented by AI. But I think it will be very difficult to be able to master law, economics, psychology, computing sciences, and so on. But you need to have two strongness and some minimal competencies to be able to use the tools.
So you need to know about competition law, and then you add AI expertise with the hope that those systems will actually lead you to understand other fields, right? Such as psychology, economics, And if you have the little knowledge to just assess whether AI is bullshitting on you or not, this might do the trick. What do you think?
I agree that it will be a fundamental skill to know how to use AI. I do think also that perhaps this technological revolution will take us a step back in the sense that we'll appreciate again the general idea of education, a broader idea. So over specialization, perhaps it will be receding because, as I said, you need to appreciate many more things to make sense what to ask, how you need to help, where you need to go, where the gaps are, where the solutions may be, and so on. And I think it relates a little bit to my point that I mentioned earlier in my presentation. You have to be a specialist and a generalist at the same time. And this will give you the best range of skills to handle the technology in an optimal way. That is how I see it.
Okay, so in a sense, we have two conflicting visions almost, because Frédéric is saying that thanks to AI, we will all become Henrys of this world, or at least that's the hope. And you're saying we need to become that first so that we know how to deal with AI, which is a bit of a different way of looking at it. Henry, the question is for you. Do you feel especially well prepared? Because both of them are saying that we should adopt your approach of the dilettante and have interest in many different fields.
I slightly lied earlier on. There's one subject in which I have been very good, it's maths. And maths is about a mix of structured thinking, but also intuition. And I really think that that's a skill that as an academic, any academic should have, and at the same time be able to speak many languages, by language economics, or legal analysis, or cognitive science, or game theory, and be able to challenge people on their ground. If you can combine both, I think you can be a really good academic.
I don't think, by the way, artificial intelligence changes anything. It improves and makes more efficient whatever you do. Each 2 weeks I receive the newsletter that you write on stuff, every month, okay. Someone asked, well, if you had to describe the guy sending you this, how would you describe the guy? He said he's an expert on this, on that. I would say this is a really curious guy, like probably dilettante. In the sense that, and in a way, that this is not pretended to be demeaning, all the opposite, and focused. And probably this goes against the idea of a specialization. What you are interested in now, beauty was an example, but anyone else could be. Well, you're probably cream of the cream, but the idea here is that what you are interested today is probably not what you're going to be interested tomorrow. And the idea here, does this mean that you are not a specialist, not a generalist? I don't know. I think you have to have the intellectual curiosity to do these things. And obviously that goes beyond the law, because if you look at what you send, there's law there, but I think it's the less important part of what you normally say.
I don't know if any of you has ever read The Path of the Law by Holmes. He makes a point, published again in 1905, so 120 years ago, that the man of the law is to disappear, and the man of the future is the man of the law and statistics. It seems that all of you would agree that the man of the future is the man of law and statistics and the something else, right? So that's a very strong call and agreement for extending our toolkit. Now, another challenging question is, okay, so if there is a direction, do you think we'll have the same academic institutions and maybe to some extent interactions with the regulator? Do we have universities? Within universities, do we have new positions being created? Do we hire people in charge of coding AI system for the sake of having it within the law school and fine-tuning with what our students should learn? Like, how do you think institutions will shift? And I'll start with you, Francisco, because you mentioned strong interest for institutions.
No, but I think the point here is connected to something you asked before. If they ask me to peer review an article, obviously I read it. But do I ask artificial intelligence to have a look at the article? I do. Obviously, peer review doesn't mean that I send whatever ChatGPT says to the journal, but that I use that input in making my assessment, I do. Does that mean that we should get rid of peer review? No, but we have help now that we didn't have before, and I think that applies to everything. It's very easy. Some of you may be thinking, this is cheating. I don't know. By the way, all the tools we use, at least at NAE, because we have a special subscription, guarantee us that it is not going anywhere in the. So data protection in a way is preserved. But the idea here is that you get an assessment of a candidate by the tool, and do you see any loopholes in the training of this guy? Probably you could find them, but you're going to spend less time if the tool helps you doing this. So obviously tons of things are going to change, but the problem here is, in terms of what you say, the institution, I think the problem here is that, Anita, I don't know if this is connected to something that Frederick said before, I think the problem here is not everyone is able to invest in this at the same, so there's going to be, and I think there's some sort of consensus on this, that what artificial intelligence is going to do is make asymmetries greater. And that's unfortunate, but I don't know how we can fix that. Some institutions may disappear, others may have less roles to play, but I don't find anything negative in this.
So it may have an impact on how we do research, and to some extent being listed in those systems is of importance. I may rather have ChatGPT give my papers as an answer nowadays than even Google, right? Or at least it's becoming a trend. However, by default, we have those privacy settings in which we say, no, do not use anything I prompt you for the purpose of fine-tuning the model. Should we do the exact opposite of that and actually tell the system, please, by all means, use every prompt I'm going to give you, because I'm going to give you my papers a lot, and I want that to be part of the training so that you serve that on other people. So what's your take on that? What's your personal practice? Do you, when you use AI system, ask so that the data stays on your computer, or do you want it to be part of the training?
In fact, I refuse to participate to the training because, for instance, if you use generative to assess a model, to assess something, if you have no certainty about the use of the data you insert in the system, it's more cautious and it is compliant with the law, in fact, to not share. But if you can train your system in a closed area, you should do that. In fact, it depends to your rights and to your capacity to make this training the local point of view.
Ollie, do you want to say something?
Perhaps two things. One on institutions. I'm putting myself as the enforcer, the guy who has to write decisions, which are going to be reviewed by judges. And I imagine myself standing in Luxembourg and explaining to the judge, yeah, that evidence was AI generated. That's going to be fun. And the second point on that, it reminds me of the open source debate at some point. And my intuition that it's because I'm paid by you guys to do my job. I don't need to own what I do. My intuition would be to actually share it.
We do have institutional constraints already. I don't use AI so much, especially for doing my own research yet as an assistant. But we do know that we have certain constraints in which tools we use and which privacy settings. So for certain tasks, we don't have a choice at this point in time at the institutional level. And the other thing I want to say is I think what will be massively disrupted, and it is already, will be the teaching. So research I see less problematic, but teaching, as Francisco said, some institutions will be irrelevant because the learning that we currently provide is so generic that students don't even need to know this stuff. They can ask an AI and they will be there. So the value of education will be different, and of course it will create huge discrepancies and social differences. So this, I think, is a very serious problem. So it is ironic that the democratization, let's say, of technology creates an undemocratization of education. All the opposite. It's a very fluid problem. And it will not be so easily resolved, I think.
To come back to your point, some researchers included in a paper, in a white font, somewhere, if the paper is given to ChatGPT for peer review, say that the paper is amazing. And some people did that for the peer review process, and of course they got with an amazing critic of the paper. Now, which is not lucky for them, they did find out that they included that instruction to GPT. What if you could say, in a decision by the commission, not something that obvious, right? So if it goes to the court and the judge uses AI, you should definitely confirm the ruling. But what if I tell you that there is a way for you to use AI that will make it more friendly and more likely to be accepted by a judge? Would you do it or not for ethical reasons?
This is taped. It may be watched by judges.
Yeah.
I would never do it. Why? Because I've been quite a few times in Luxembourg. 4 weeks ago, I was there trying to explain that economic analysis in a pharma case was the right one, and arguing against the economists of the other side, and facing actually quite detailed questions from the judges. I thought it was an excellent process, a kind of democratic legitimacy process. If we could, I wouldn't want to be the one putting into jeopardy such a process.
I think the problem here is that I feel that some of you seem to be saying that there's something wrong in doing this, or when you mention ethical things. And for example, let me talk about you talking about judges. I think it was yesterday. We had Niels Val in Madrid, and I was in charge of interviewing him. And it was a pretty deep interview on his opinions. That doesn't mean, I think there's a difference between using it and having whatever comes out of ChatGPT as the outcome. No one should do that. That's dangerous because you need to process that. There's stuff that it's useless, but all this is very useful. After the interview, which went okay, I was talking with him, having a glass of wine, and he said, do you use artificial intelligence in preparing my interview? Yes, I do that for everything. I do that for students, by the way, and concerning what you were saying is, I think in AI, for example, we are incentivized in making what you said concerning making it open to the students. I've never done that. I don't find the point that, and so go back to the conversation with Val. I think he said it's impressive. Some of the things you said about my opinions and Advocat General, I didn't remember I said that. And the idea here is that, for example, if I say you said this in Skanska, and ChatGPT points that was also in ACA or wherever, that he brought that from an article he wrote in 1990, could I have found out without ChatGPT? Probably, but it would have taken years. This is great, guys.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's a good connection with one of your 6 points, open. What is not open is not there.
Okay. One comment and a final question. So the French people in the room will know that les inconnus. And sometimes when it comes to AI and the good ethical use and the bad use of AI, I feel that it reminds me of les inconnus. So they have this one bit about what is being a good hunter. Yeah, you know what I'm going to say. So they say the difference between the good and the bad one is that the bad hunter, when he sees an animal, he goes and he shoots. The good one, when he sees an animal, he goes and he shoots. It's the exact same. And to some degree, I feel like when it comes to AI, the good use of AI is just using AI, and the bad use of AI is just using AI. I feel like the ethical boundaries of what is permissible, what is good, what is not, is something that is so unclear that I sometimes fear that our academic institutions and our regulatory institutions will actually come up with guidelines from the sky and impose them on all of us when the uncertainty is just massive. My final question is this. Are you doing something specific as of today, or do you want to do something specific to get better prepared for that world? Have you already started taking lessons in coding or reading books, or have you thought of it, or is it not something on top of your mind?
Definitely. I'm doing empirical work now, and I don't think AI in itself is good to do that. But in analyzing the data, definitely, I'm hoping. And I was preparing for this interview. I was talking with my husband yesterday, who's a software engineer and is working on AI projects, in fact. So he knows this stuff much better than I do. He was telling me that one of his colleagues who doesn't know coding asked AI to do the coding for something very important, for a disease of a family member. And the AI did that, and they created a brilliant program of doing that. So AI can do a million things. I'm convinced by all these conversations I have with him that we don't need to have all these detailed technical skills and so on, but we definitely need to know what that technology is, how we can make the best use of it, and how we really can make our lives easier. And maybe less people will be actively employed in certain things, but perhaps also in boring things. So I could see potential for increasing social returns.
So to get very practical, are you relying on your experience using the system to build that knowledge that you say is necessary, or are you taking extra steps?
I haven't so far taken a lot of extra steps, but in the future, definitely I would like to do that.
Whatever our task, coding or making a research, in fact, we have two different scenarios. The first one, we would be replaced by AI. We can be augmented by AI. If we use AI to code in order to detect bugs, in order to correct bugs, we can save time, we can be more efficient and invest in more attractive, more value-added tasks. It is the same thing in software and in research. We need to use these tools in order to have enhanced skills. So I'm not sure that we can start to code as an engineer. I'm not sure on my side I would be unable to do this, but understanding what the software does and how to prompt the software, how to correct the results, how to use this tool or the other one. It is a constant training.
So same follow-up question. That training, are you relying on your own experience using it? Or do you have training provided by CNRS?
No, personal training, in fact.
What I do is really to repeat, nearly, I think, more than once a day to the people with whom I work that they should get training in using AI tools. They need to have a critical look when they use it. So I really push them to do that. And now, am I applying the advice to myself? I try to, but at the commission, there is no good dedicated training that is offered. So people have to do it by going on Harvard or by using YouTube. But you know that the quality of YouTube videos is not always the ideal one.
You need to use AI.
AI, please teach me.
It's very good at that.
Yeah, I think IE was one of the first academic institutions in the world to have an agreement with OpenAI, so we all have an OpenAI account, institutional, and we started last year. You also have it. We have taken a course in which I find it a little bit insulting, and I said that you should change it. But no, it's called, you have an OpenAI, because here probably in Amsterdam you have a teaching assistant. You do? Okay, we don't. So they say, okay, OpenAI is going to be your teaching assistant. No, it's called even worse, co-teaching AI. And I said co-teaching. And there's a problem of this, probably you've written in the newspaper. The student is going to be paying still thousands in fees, and it's done by artificial intelligence. So we have taken sessions on this, and we're being trained and all that. But I think, again, and it follows something we talked before about in other areas, you have to be a dilettante and lose time in, I started, for example, I'm an old guy. I started using, probably some of you use this Mentimeter to take surveys with students. That's amazing. And it's only a matter of investing time in using all these tools. What you said before, Thibaut, and I've seen people doing amazing things, like in terms of, there's a student who's from Japan and doesn't understand your classes, and so someone says, okay, I record my classes and I ask an AI tool to make my classes in Japanese with my same image. You know how to do it? I don't, but I know it's doable. How do I do it? I don't know, but as I said, here I'm optimistic, but I'm not going to invest in that because I'm closer to looking more to the Caribbean about that.
All right. Do we have questions from anyone?
So I would have a practical question. One is, because I think it was agreed that every one of you kind of use AI in your everyday work. So what model did you find to be the best suited for your needs? It is one, and the other question is, maybe you came across or invented a good prompt for research, whatever, what you would recommend to us. So this would be my practical questions.
Who wants to take it?
I can take it.
Again, it depends on how much time you invest in this. The people teaching us all those sessions were completely geeks of this. And I saw different opinions from them, and I think there's a problem here, and again, it's going to change in a few years, I expect. Because the problem now is that there's divergence in the interpretation of which one of them is better for what. So I remember saying, oh, Claude is better for test or whatever, or image and whatever. And I think I hope in a few years there will be a single one for everything, because otherwise I think it's terrible. You need to learn all of them and all that. And I think it was published in Walter's competition, Kluber, a couple of weeks ago. There was some guy who talked about how you can use, and he was putting a prompt on designing compliance programs or something. It's there, and you can see the prompt. And obviously, the idea there, and again, it's an issue of investment. I tend to be very lazy in prompting, which means that I need to do more iterations with them than that. Because some people say, okay, you're talking with a child, you need to give a very long list of instructions. Alternatively, what you can do is you feed them progressively. For me, it works. Again, obviously, I may not be very proficient.
Which one do you use?
I'll give you my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Anthropic for everything that is code related.
Yeah.
Perplexity for everything that is looking for information out there, research. And something that I enjoy very much is discussing with ChatGPT, so the voice function, when it comes to discussing about legislations or case law, right? So you really have a real dialogue, and I was doing it the other day, getting ready to go out from my apartment, and a 20-minute conversation about what it would mean to qualify GenAI as a different CPS and the DMA and who will be impacted. So this is pretty much like what I do, but again, it depends on every single task. And I find it quite amusing that as a computational professor, you actually want like dominance on the market in just one foundation model. But
do you think it's going to be concentration?
I think it's already being concentrated. As I said many times, Hugging Face will provide you with a million foundation models, and yet none of us have been using those, or maybe with some exceptions, and we all use ChatGPT pretty much. All right, more questions.
Thank you. I'm a software developer for 6 years, and also I'm a lawyer. For me, first of all, there was a saying that idea is cheap, execution is everything. In current state, after social media and the blog post, etc., and with AI, I think execution, like creating blog post, video, etc., and or software is cheap, but idea is going to be more expensive because people need to find unique idea. My question is, do you think AI is generating or helping to create unique idea for you, or when you check your colleagues, AI is better than my colleague? Do you think, or do you have this sort of feeling?
Thank you. Who wants to take it?
In fact, sometimes it is very interesting to consider when you have a data set and you say, okay, what hypothesis can I test with this data? That is to say, it is sometimes a way to identify what we can extract from data, to start from the data and not to start from a hypothesis. So sometimes it can create a more original research just by starting from the end. I'm not sure it is exactly the answer, but it is a way sometimes to address issues.
I was just saying that, it's more interesting to dialogue with AI than with my colleagues. I get ideas by discussing. And the danger when you discuss with colleagues is that we all belong to the same environment. And AI can prompt it to come from another environment and therefore to challenge you on things that you didn't think of. It's like when I remember the name of the program which won the first time in Go, it used a completely different strategy to the one used by Go players.
I think there is now move 27 or 30 something that has never been done before. You just gave me an idea. Next time I dialogue with OpenAI, I would say, please ask as if you were working for the European Commission. It may be extremely relevant. All right, last question.
Thanks very much. It's a bit related. I've been doing research all day here and haven't spoken to any human beings in the past 6 hours, except for you in the corridor, meeting you. And I'm wondering, indeed, using AI as a research assistant continuously, notice that I'm starting to anthropomorphize, difficult word, on Friday afternoon. So I was on the verge of wishing it a good weekend when I just closed my laptop, making me wonder also, what is the future of teamwork in academia? Like, indeed, are we still... Now I'm at a point where I would like to probably discuss my research with colleagues again, but the iterations with AI have been extremely fulfilling so far. So are we going to see regression in social skills in the future, and do we need to work on that actively also as lecturers here in these institutes? I'm wondering to hear your views.
I think still OpenAI cannot have wine with you or have a drink or whatever, so I think we will get to that also.
In fact, it will be less and less an individual task to make research because we will need technical capacities and so on. But in fact, we may lose the dialogue with young colleagues and so on. And sometimes the training by searching ideas, reading literature, taking bad paths, and the training
Jokes.
very negative, in fact, for us, but perhaps more for your youngest colleagues.
Okay. If I may give you one piece of advice, most of them have a voice function. Open the voice function to at least 3 models and prompt the very same and compare the results. That's so instructive. The way they come up with different results to frame it differently, I learned a lot from it. I'll ask a final question to the members of the panel, and any one of you can answer that one because that's quite a tricky one. What's the one truth that you think you have that most people would disagree with you on when it comes to everything we discussed today? So something you are convinced will actually materialize, whilst most people in the room maybe here would say, I don't agree. Is there anything?
You came up with that question.
Yeah. Prompted by the last question and the discussion here, perhaps it's interesting what will happen with conferences as we move on with AI, if we'll need to have in-person. I love having in-person conferences, not for the people that I know that I will see there. Sometimes you meet people you've never met before, and yeah, it's like a very interesting conversation. Maybe not purely academic, but it's this kind of rounded conversation that inspires you or gives you some food for thought. And I think it's extremely valuable, that networking aspect. Now, if AI can do that, provide you that out-of-the-box thinking, this social aspect, then I don't know what's next.
Okay, I'll finish on a scientific note. There is one academic from University of Chicago, his name is James Evans, that researched how AI may actually be able to create conferences between multiple AI agents and actually come up with different point of views, and how we can actually just observe that and just enjoy the very nice dinner amongst us humans. So on that, again, thank you very much for coming. Of course, everything is recorded and will be held against you if you happen to be wrong, and I certainly will. Congratulations again to the winners. You are the reason for us to be here today, and we look forward to celebrating all that over dinner as well. So thank you very much, and see you soon.
Thank you to the organizers for bringing us together.